All right, we're going live in just a few moments, and I think we are live now. Let's give just a couple moments
Welcome.
All right, we're coming here. You know, you got to play the classic family gathering song.
Yes.
All right, looks like Facebook is on, YouTube is on. Let me get us phased out here. All right, you know, that's a good part for us to get started. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here at Civility Wins. Welcome to our celebration. Civility Wins pays homage to Juneteenth. I'm Sandy B, and I'm here with Miss Kristen Goss. How are you doing tonight, Kristen?
I am doing just fine. Thank you. Thank you. And welcome, everyone. Kristen Goss here with Sandy B.
All right. So tonight we decided we were going to go a little Juneteenth on you because, you know, as we talk about different topics on this channel, we always want to tap in to things that are very, you know, up close and personal. We want to tap into things that are going on and share our perspectives. And no better topic than Juneteenth. So, you know, we decided today, since today is the day that Juneteenth is being observed, that we will share some thoughts and ideas about this celebration of Juneteenth, something that's been going on for quite some time over the years, but now is coming to the forefront because Juneteenth is now being observed as a federal holiday. But even with us having Juneteenth established as a federal holiday, you'd be surprised to know, Kristen, some of these government entities are not celebrating Juneteenth. I know some of these teachers are out here working for summer school. I know some of these universities are not acknowledging the Juneteenth celebration. I take a little issue with that, Kristen, because I know we celebrate all kinds of things throughout the year. So what are your thoughts on this like uneven distribution of Juneteenth being observed?
Well, you already know me, Miss Sandy B. I am all about equality. And it's about time we had a holiday that celebrates and commemorates, and we're paying homage with Civility Wins on Juneteenth. Well, not on Juneteenth, but we're setting aside this day to acknowledge American history. That's what I think about Juneteenth. It's part of our history and it needs to be acknowledged. So, you know, I am a little bit disappointed that our schools, you know, and like you said, some universities are not acknowledging this. I will give a shout out to the Broward County Courthouse, and I'm certain that there are other courthouses that were off today in honor of Juneteenth. So kudos to those who are acknowledging American history. That's how I see it.
Look,
What about you?
On my end, my office is closed today, even though I had things that definitely could have been done today. I have a law student intern that's working with me and a high school intern working with me this summer. Nope, we are acknowledging and celebrating Juneteenth. And my words were, please enjoy this day with your family and friends in honor of Juneteenth. So I think it's very important to understand that Juneteenth has an impact beyond, I would say, the historical context of the holiday. And I wanted to kind of touch on a couple of things because I was looking at a few different articles talking about Juneteenth is growing, but some are kind of worrying that the meaning behind Juneteenth is being lost. And while there are celebrations, while there are all types of activities going on, you know, we're kind of losing, you know, the traditional historical contents of Juneteenth, because the traditional holiday basically celebrates the day that enslaved people in Galveston, Texas, learned that they were free. And they were the last group of enslaved people to learn that they were free, basically 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. So you have a situation where while the slaves were freeish during this period of time, these particular individuals out of Galveston, Texas, were the last to get word. And so the year after this acknowledgement began the celebration of Juneteenth. And now, we have, signing into law as of last year, the acknowledgement of Juneteenth as a federal holiday. And I think last year, it's funny, there were some that took off both the Friday, because I think Juneteenth fell on either a Saturday. I think it fell on a Saturday last year. So some acknowledged it on that Friday. Some acknowledged it on Monday. Some acknowledged it on both last year. So people were kind of taking advantage. But there's something unique about different experiences and thoughts and ideas when it comes to Juneteenth. For me, Juneteenth is an opportunity for us to learn and really embrace a time in history that is important to Black people. And for me, I think as we're into the second year of the actual federal holiday, I'm feeling and learning more and more about, the foundations of the holiday. What does Juneteenth mean to you?
I think it means everything. I think it's the foundation of how we got to where we are today. Being Black, being women, being attorneys, and authors, and the list continues, to have the freedom that everybody else has. That's cute. That's key. I mean, this nation was built on certain core principles that were not, unfortunately, acknowledged by, or not for everyone. And to see the change happen that it did, to make this a federal holiday, to me, it represents freedom and a new tomorrow.
Right.
So it's extremely important to me. It's important that I pass on the tradition and what Juneteenth is all about to the next generation. So to me, and to sum up, the whole meaning is freedom and opportunity. That's what I would say. Yeah.
Absolutely. And something that I wanted to kind of chat a little bit about before we get into some of our topics tonight is, the Juneteenth colors. As I've been kind of digging around, I'm noticing a lot of usage in the, I would say, green, yellow, red color usage, black, for the Juneteenth colors. And, in a lot of contexts, I'm seeing that these are actually Pan-African colors. But when you go back and look at some of the foundations when it comes to the celebration of Juneteenth from Galveston, Texas, the origination of, this celebration, the flag colors and, the different imagery was using red, white, and blue. It was just different imagery, but it was still using our, United States flag colors. I don't know where this, yellow, red, green concept came from. And I'm noticing that there are some companies kind of getting in trouble for using imagery on Juneteenth and doing things like serving watermelon at company events and chicken. And, there's just so many things that are happening. And I'm like, I think Juneteenth is a good opportunity, similar to Black History Month, to educate ourselves and to learn as much as we can. And as we go each year, I think we'll get closer to some of the foundational ideas a bit, even though I do fear that Juneteenth is just going to become commercialized like many other holidays. But I think for us, it's our responsibility to educate ourselves and share the information that we learn as we go through these processes over time.
Absolutely. I agree. And I hear that educator in you coming out in that, but that's true. We definitely need to be educated, and they say knowledge is power. So yes, we definitely need to be educated about this.
Now, one thing that this Juneteenth conversation brings me to is us reflecting on our Black voices. And there's much diversity in the Black voice, especially culturally speaking. I'm Haitian. You're American, and it's always interesting when I think about the way that we celebrate holidays and the way that we go through events. We started off playing,
Mhm.
some Frankie Beverly and Maze. That's a classic. At the cookout for the Black family. The classic. At any gathering for the Black family. But I'm always interested to look at how we have changed as Black people. Some of the ways that
Mhm.
our voices are being used. Um, I feel like we have a lot of opportunity to express a voice more so now than probably we've had in many, many years, especially in our generation. So I can't speak for past generations, but I can speak for mine and yours. Our voices are being explored a bit more, but
Mhm.
I still feel like, for example, there shouldn't be a question mark as to a celebration of something like a Juneteenth. Like, why did it take this long? Like, the first celebration of this was back in 1979. It is
Mhm.
2021 when Juneteenth is being acknowledged as a federal holiday. I take issue with that. Like, what? That's
Yeah.
something that's a point in history for the Black
Mhm.
community that should be expressed just like any other points in history for any other groups. And you and I both know we have a lot of things on our federal holiday calendar that express a lot of backgrounds and groups. But I always feel like
Mhm.
when it comes to us as Black people, there is always like a dimming of our activities and events. It's kind of like, give them this little day or give them this little month. But
Mhm.
when it's time to take time and really, take a day off or do something in commemoration or acknowledgement or in celebration or observance, it's kind of like, oh, well, slavery was a long time ago, but
Mhm. Mhm.
everybody else can celebrate throughout the year all kinds of things that
Mhm.
were also a long time
Mhm.
ago.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's all in perspective because I look at it as this is freedom. This is not about slavery because I can hear that that is a statement that's made. Oh, we're going to go back in time and, we're way past the slavery days. We've moved and we've grown as a nation.
Right.
Okay, great. We have grown as a nation. And what better way to show that we've grown as a nation than to celebrate the freeing of slaves?
Right.
That, you know, all of us, regardless of your skin color, regardless of where you come from, you are a human being and we should all be treated the same.
Truth.
So that's how I see it. It's something that is a positive thing and it shows the progression of our country. So why not celebrate it? That would be my question. Why not?
Well, the why not always comes down to, whether or not there's some valuation in the Black voice. And
Mm-hmm.
we, you and I both know that there are many times that our voices are kind of stunted,
Mm-hmm.
especially in the legal profession. Um, you know, the presence of us as Black, women, as Black people in the legal profession, many times is not seen on the same level as other groups. And so when we talk about freedom and we talk about the concepts behind it and expressing some appreciation for things that have happened historically, I think that's also expressed in our day to day. Our whole platform is about civility wins. But how can civility win when freedom doesn't exist, right? How can civility win when the acknowledgement of different perspectives and beliefs and views is kind of seen as, a back burner? It's not seen as
Mm-hmm.
something that is as important as any other voices or any other ideas or any other, historical moments. Um, I
Mm-hmm.
think this concept of freedom, is not a universal concept. Even though there is a thought about it as, oh, well, we all have these opportunities. Yes, but
Mm-hmm.
the weighing in terms of our voices in society as a whole, I always feel like is at a lower level. The
Mhm.
playing field is never even. So if we're saying, we're all equal, it may appear on the surface allegedly that we're all equal, but our footing is different, right? Somebody has a
Mhm.
little higher
Mhm.
footing, but maybe their eye
Mhm.
level is the same. I may be at a little lower footing, but my eye level ends up at the same. It's not the same thing.
Mhm. And that's something important because we have another generation or two, behind us that are growing, and it's important to me that they know that they are important, and that it's not just a talk of you're equal, but I want them to really feel that and to be able to experience that. So, I am thankful for the holiday. I just say, let's continue to grow and learn and be educated as a nation.
Absolutely. And, so when we think about, how our voices have changed, we think about
Hmm.
some of the issues that have come about, I can't help but think of our interactions with individuals. And I wanted to start the conversation with what I would label as the Karen epidemic, right? Many times, sometimes when we want to express a thought about things that are happening, people dismiss it as, oh, that's not everybody. That's not everybody. But the issue behind this Karen epidemic, labeling, you'll typically see that there is a white woman expressing something against any other group of individuals, because oftentimes there's a level of privilege that we tend to talk about that is not even amongst us as women or amongst us as Black people. And this whole Karen epidemic that really popped up during a lot of the civil unrest in recent years, with things that have happened with the killing of many Black men, um, really comes down to us not being seen in the same light, right? So, many times you will have, a white woman will say something and that value is higher, right? A Black woman could say the same thing and it's a different thing, right? So, I've had instances recently where, you know, a white woman's behavior was just completely like, I can't even describe it. Like, professionalism is not even close to a conversation, right? Um, but had I done the same exact thing and expressed the same exact sentiments or behaviors, I would be labeled an angry Black woman. But the same things expressed by a white woman would be seen as, she's just expressing herself, right? She's upset, she's frustrated, she's angry, but it's almost like she's rightfully angry. Whereas it's kind of like, oh, you women, you're just angry Black women. It's kind of like, dismissive. um I think that plays a
Hmm.
lot into our conversations about this concept of freedom, right? Because we talk about slavery has ended. We talk about, let freedom, exist in our community. But can we really be free if our expressions are not free, right? If we're not being embraced in thought and idea.
Mm. That's a good point. That is a good point. And, it can turn from a physical freedom to not so much mentally or emotionally.
Right.
And I'm glad you brought that up because I know for myself, I can speak for myself personally. There are plenty of times where um, I hold my tongue, hold my mouth, because you don't want to be perceived as that angry Black woman. Um, you want to remain professional at all times. But
Right.
I do think that it's an extra burden that we carry as Black women, um, because, like you said, if we are expressing ourselves in a certain way, it can be viewed differently from someone else in comparison to someone else. Um, and then speaking of this lack of freedom in other ways, mental health, that's another issue that we should
Yes.
talk about as a community. Because while, going to a therapist and seeing it as something that is necessary for your mental health is becoming more popular and more accepted amongst our community, I think that we still lag behind in comparison to other groups,
Right.
especially our men. Don't even, get me started on that. So, is this resistance, if you want to say, towards going to a therapist, or not even so much doing that, but meditating or getting in tune with your emotions and your feelings and talking to each other, or being vulnerable, or the lack of being vulnerable? Is that something because of us not feeling like we are free to do that?
Well,
What do you think about that?
you're tapping into the conversation about freedom in terms of freedom of expression, right? Freedom
Mm-hmm.
of the ability to have thoughts and ideas separate and apart from our, day to day, right? Because mental health is something that in other communities may or may not be regarded as a thing.
Mm-hmm.
When you see things like people talking about the strong black woman, I've never heard of anybody say strong white woman, strong Hispanic woman, strong Asian woman. I don't hear those concepts. Um, Women are
Mm-hmm.
allowed to have emotion, but black women are supposed to be strong.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Black men are always seen in a light of more aggressive. This
Mm-hmm.
idea of having emotion, it's kind of like man up, be a man, right? But white men, they don't have to man up, right? They can express emotion, compassion. Other groups of men may suffer as well. Hispanic men, I don't see them as necessarily being allowed to be emotional. There's a level of, a man has a thing. And I can only really speak about us in the black community, but I know even as women, you know, historically speaking, we've had some splits in time. There was a time where the black man was always seen as the force in the household, but with that came a understanding that emotion doesn't get included there. His mental health doesn't get included in there. And now in our generation, I feel like there is a little bit more edge to, let's talk about the black man and what he feels, but that's
Mm-hmm.
with still the undertone of a black man being emotional can be seen as aggression,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Or weak,
Or
quote
as
unquote
weakness,
weak.
right? So aggression or
Mm-hmm.
weakness, whereas other groups of individuals have the freedom to actually be whatever they are at that moment and have that feeling and the emotion. um Even with when we talk about like the LGBTQ community, there's different ideas about men versus women in that community. And if we specify and we talk about black men and black women in that community, or individuals who identify in whatever category, or if they don't identify at all, there are ideas about the expression, right? There are ideas about how someone is to behave, and that is imposing upon, whatever they choose to identify as. But I specifically note that when we say a black man, there are things already imposed. So this concept of freedom, when we talk about Juneteenth, we're talking about foundational ideas of freedom. We start with physical freedom, but we're also included in the voices, because how many times growing up have you ever heard about this concept of Juneteenth?
I was going to say, I was not educated until I was an adult about it.
I mean, this is recent
And
concept for me.
yes, yes,
That's
absolutely.
that
And
says a lot, right?
it's sad. Yeah.
So I think there are so many things that fold into this understanding of what Juneteenth was foundationally about, but taking it beyond the actual celebration of the physical issues involved, but the emotional standing, right? If
Mm,
we
mm-hmm.
can't recognize or acknowledge or observe a moment in history that impacted a group of people, specifically Black people, then what are we saying about the coping? What are we saying about the level of emotional freedom, the physical freedom,
Mm,
intellectual freedom, if we can't even learn
mm-hmm.
about the historical context? Because as far as I'm concerned, the only things I learned about when it comes to Black people historically was really just slavery.
It's slavery. Yeah.
And when you think slavery, you're thinking oppression, you're thinking pain.
Mm-hmm.
You're not,
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing about happiness there.
Mm-hmm.
So if I can't acknowledge moments in history where our people have suffered pain and anguish and oppression, then how can I give them freedom to express moments of pain, fear, oppression?
Mm-hmm.
It can't really exist without
Mm-hmm.
acknowledgement.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because think of other groups that have had moments in time where their people have been oppressed, and think about the way that they're allowed to express celebrations, the way that they're allowed
It's
to
very
acknowledge,
true.
right? There's days off, all kinds of days off,
Mm-hmm.
all kinds of acknowledgement, all kinds
Mm-hmm.
of awareness, and it's ingrained within our education system. But what do we celebrate in
Yes.
education when it comes to the freedom of Black people and the things that Black people have gone through, and acknowledging what happened to really give appreciation to how it's impacted us today? Because those things
Mm-hmm.
foundationally still affect us today in our
Yeah.
institutions, in our relationships, in our ability to attain certain levels. Think about how we exist in society and what we're
Mm-hmm.
allowed to feel and experience. There's always Black mental health is now starting to really be a heavy push, and it's been creeping over the years,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm
Mm-hmm.
starting to see more people embrace it and talk about it openly in many different spaces. But at the same token, in our day-to-day interaction, you and I deal with an industry where our voices are not at the forefront. They're not even seen as the
Mm-hmm.
standard. Because
Mm-hmm.
think of this: if I asked 100 people their visual, if they were able to visually identify what a lawyer visually looks like, I'm certain that you and I, our faces wouldn't really be at the forefront of that idea,
Mm-hmm.
right? If someone were able to tap into folks' visual impressions and say, the word lawyer, and what's the first visual that pops into mind, even the first visual doesn't pop in to look like me,
It's
because
true.
that's what we're already programmed to see. And I think those types of things have a heavy effect on the situations that we experience in our lives. In particular, the strong Black woman syndrome. And one thing I would like to say about that is I have gradually started to really do away with this concept of a strong Black woman. I don't want to be strong.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be heard. I want to be appreciated. I want
Well,
to be
what
acknowledged.
about what about the idea of strong being able to express yourself,
But I don't want
being
strong.
able to being
Sorry.
able to be vulnerable, like strong in a sense where you're not like tough, you're strong in a sense where you're comfortable in your own skin. And that means if I'm sad, I'm going to tell you I'm sad. I don't have to have this facade or put on this facade that I'm okay. I can be sad and it's okay because I still, at the end of the day, am Kristen Goss. I
Right.
am who I am. So I think that we need to change that mindset, because
Yeah.
again, like I feel like expressing, oh, I feel sad or I'm angry or, whatever the case may be, that's seen as weakness. But in reality,
Yeah.
it's just showing that you are comfortable expressing how you feel. And we're human and it's okay.
And that's exactly my thought. I want strength to be associated where it needs to be, right? If I'm expressing pain, don't tell me to be strong. Don't tell me that I'm a
Mm-hmm.
strong Black woman. That's not what I want to hear. I want you to
Mm-hmm.
embrace what I'm expressing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because in
Mm-hmm.
no other context do people tell women, oh, you're a strong Black, you're a strong white, you're a strong Asian, you're a strong. No, people embrace the emotion. Someone is expressing
Mm-hmm.
hurt or pain. So don't
Mm-hmm.
dispense with what they're expressing by saying, oh, strong Black woman. No, Black woman who is experiencing pain. Let me live in what that is, acknowledge it,
Mm-hmm.
embrace it, and then we can talk about my
Mm-hmm.
strength, right? But don't be
Mm-hmm.
dismissive of my moments of pain by just putting a
Mm-hmm.
stamp on it and saying, "Oh, you're a strong Black woman." It's a lot of the reason many people do not seek out any kind of mental health support, because the idea is there's two different lanes that I see in our community. God will provide, and you're a strong Black woman,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Mm-hmm.
if you just pray about it, that's all you need. No,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you need to pray
Mm-hmm.
about it, but you also need to
Mm-hmm.
be embraced for where you're experiencing a pain, and that needs
Mm-hmm.
to be addressed in
Mm-hmm.
line with your faith, in line with your
Mm-hmm.
strength, in line with all these things,
Mm-hmm.
but not dismissing of what you're feeling and putting those things in its place. Does that make sense?
I 100% agree. Yeah. And that's why we are where we are now, I believe, with the mental health, because you holding your feelings or keeping them to yourself, eventually you're going to explode. And that's not healthy for you as a person and for your mental health. Um, and so I hate to say it this way, but being strong is seeing that I'm human, and because I feel this certain way, I'm going to talk about it.
Right.
Um, and I'm excited because I do think, and I see a transition for our community, and especially for those that are coming out after us, because they're definitely a different breed for sure.
Yes.
Um, and it makes me smile because I've said this before, and I think you and I have had conversations growing up when we were children. There are a lot of things we might have thought, but we wouldn't dare say. And to a certain degree, I'm traditional, so I would say that, you still should be respectful, but I think for me, it's a mutual thing as well. Um, and it's all in the approach, and it's all in how you do something or how you say something. But I'm excited because I feel like the next generation, a lot of the things that we may have allowed or kept quiet or kept to ourselves, they aren't so much like that.
Right.
And I think that's a beautiful thing if it's, of course, honed in um, or fostered in the right way.
Yeah, I definitely think in the context of celebrating Juneteenth, um, my hope is that this idea of freedom and what that actually means in all of the different realms of our lives will really take hold. And I see a lot of that. I see, the children that are growing up now are being allowed more to express themselves. Sometimes a little too much. I think that we
Yes.
now, in addition to allowing them to express themselves, we have to teach them the levels of appropriateness for those expressions, right? Because just
Mm-hmm.
because you're angry doesn't mean that you're permitted to just do whatever, right? Just because you're feeling
Yes.
pain, that there are ways to express your emotion. And so the step above from, you know, being able to express oneself is being able to understand how to appropriately do so, right? Because you
Mhm.
hurt doesn't
Mhm.
mean that you can hurt others, right? So you have to learn to express what you're feeling, but also understanding too levels of respect too. The one thing that I feel that sometimes is a bit lacking is respect for elders. And I'm
Yes.
not asking for people to respect elders beyond measure, right? Because I know how our elders can be. Shoot, I know how we in our generation can be to the younger generation at times, right? We can be dismissive.
Mhm.
We can be really like,
Mhm.
oh, they don't know anything kind of thing. But I
Mhm.
think that there has to be a balance between it because, you know, there are lessons to be learned from previous generations. And
Mhm.
those lessons involve understanding levels of respect,
Mhm.
appropriateness, um,
Mhm.
being kind, shoot, talking us,
Just be kind.
being civil, you know,
Yes.
understanding
Yes.
that even though you're upset doesn't mean you get on the phone and yell like a banshee, like this one woman that I spoke to on the phone not long ago, right? You can't just get on a phone yelling in somebody's ear and then somehow expect that
Right.
person is listening to what you're going to say, because I trust me, if you're yelling at me,
Mhm.
you're either getting you're on ignore completely, or you're not going to like what you're going to get. And I'm not usually one
Yes.
to kind of talk to people out of my person,
Mhm.
but I can get there.
Mhm.
I can get
Mhm.
there.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I think it's important to be understanding of the role that mental health plays, especially in our community, who you know, that voices have not always been allowed to exist. And
Mhm.
recognizing now that because we have opportunities to express a voice, you know, even on this platform, you know, we're expressing different
Mhm.
ideas. Some may agree with our thoughts and ideas, some may not. But that doesn't mean that we can allow them to be dismissive of our ideas, right? Because we have an experience. So when we
Mhm.
say, you know, when we talk about our experiences as Black people, or we talk about our experiences as Black women, or our experiences as Black women attorneys, or your experience as a mom, or my experience, you know, in dealing with different, you know, levels of people in the disability community,
Mhm.
we're all exposed to different things, but we're also understanding of the fact that voices are not equally heard. They're not equally heard. So freedom for me, when we talk about Juneteenth and freedom, I like the fact that we're talking about this freedom, right? But I want us to be able to take from it an appreciation for the history, an education of all things Juneteenth, and not allow it to just become like you know, another thing that's on the list to celebrate without even a thought about what the true historical context is, right? What the true meaning of this is and how we can apply it into our lives today. Um, so I want to talk also about behaviors in our community. We are a very rich community, the Black community, and we come in all kinds of shades and ethnicities, and we have a lot of shared experiences, but we have a lot of different experiences that are not shared across the board. Um, and I think the unfortunate part about us having more of a voice is that you also have voices that sometimes I think praise negative behaviors. You know, I feel like when people think Black, they always think of things that I'm just like, how do you associate that with just Black culture? Like that. Like, no, I don't want you to associate that with being Black. Like it's like, you know, we're sitting there. I was reading something about, let me give you a couple of examples, because I'm reading this article and they were talking about how companies were getting in trouble. And I'm just like, you know, I don't understand how you get to this point, because it's not difficult to get information right now, right? Information is at our fingertips and
Mhm.
it's very easy for us to find. So I'm reading this article and it's like the Children's Museum of Indianapolis apologized after having to remove a menu item for its upcoming Juneteenth jamboree: watermelon salad, which reinforced a racial stereotype that all Black Americans like watermelon. The
Listen, I don't like watermelon. I don't. I think it's disgusting. True words.
The museum is currently reviewing how we may best convey these stories and traditions during this year's Juneteenth celebration. Now, let me tell y'all something, Children's Museum of Indianapolis. I got to put my head to my temple, my hand to my temple. It don't take but 2 moments for you to Google Juneteenth, Juneteenth history, and find reputable sites where you can find information, historical. And if you are putting on an event, I imagine that there is somebody putting the event on. And if somebody is putting the event on, I imagine that they had to do some preparation and some research. Why? Like, here we go. Walmart debuted a red velvet and cheesecake flavored Juneteenth ice cream this year. I'm so bad at Walmart. Its carton was adorned in red, yellow, and green, which are Pan-African colors. But the traditional Juneteenth flag, designed by National Juneteenth Celebration Foundation founder Ben Haith in 1997, is red, white, and blue to replicate the flags for the United States and the Lone Star State, because the celebration came out of Texas. The big box store, Walmart, also released Juneteenth napkins with the following.
Oh, boy.
It's the freedom for me written on them, and sold a tank top with the words, because my ancestors weren't free in 1976, modeled by a white woman. Walmart. Let me not. Walmart. I don't expect much from you, right? I really don't expect much from you. But at the bare minimum, if you are celebrating Juneteenth, an acknowledgement of the freedom of the last batch of the slaves out of Galveston, Texas, don't you think you could have tapped into some? You are a huge corporation. There is no reason that you can't find out some foundational things. You do not need to put red velvet or watermelon in your ingredients in order to celebrate Juneteenth. Now, if you really wanted to do something, you would say, what were the early celebrators of Juneteenth consuming on that day? And then you would provide a piece of education into why you would do certain things. But you can't just throw fried chicken, red velvet, and watermelon and think that you have a Juneteenth celebration. I'm so through with
there
them.
You go.
And I'm just like,
that's funny.
But it brings to mind a certain thing, though, as well. With a celebration comes, commercialization, profit, monetization. And it's always seen as, once someone latches onto an idea, they latch onto all of the stereotypes, right? So you're going to see things replicated in this Juneteenth celebration that may not be accurate to the actual celebration because it's being commercialized, right? So people are going to just create their own colors. They're going to create their own designs. They're going to create their own ideas and imagery and menus. And it's like, dudes, like you all, there's a website that you can find, I'm sure, right? I just did a few Googlings and I was able to find all kinds of news articles and find some different things that touched on different topics. So come on, you cannot tell me that you don't understand how to find information because you do market research, I'm sure. Now, if your market research is limited to stereotypical ideas, then we got a problem. And we definitely need to do some more educating when it comes to Juneteenth. But in going back to talking about the behaviors in our culture, again, behaviors are relative, right, to background, because my background is Haitian. I'm Black, but my background is Haitian. So there's certain behaviors that I see out in the community that were never allowed, embraced, or idolized in my community because it was just seen as not appropriate. But I think it's important for us as we talk about our freedoms and our ability to express ourselves to understand, there's levels to this. You can't just present trash, for example, and expect people to think that it's a treasure. You can't present us in a negative light and then keep pumping that image and expect, folks to not push back, because I'm always game to push back on the nonsense, right? I don't care whether or not, you have the freedom to express yourself. you also have an obligation to be respectful of yourself and others, and
Yeah.
not to allow behaviors in our culture to be seen as the standard. No, I'm not accepting that. I'm not accepting
Yeah.
that. Right? We're not going to keep certain negative behaviors as a standard. Instead, we're going to try to identify why these behaviors exist and try to work with the younger generation so that we can avoid certain things that, I was looking at some videos not long ago on TikTok,
Mm.
and it was multiracial groups. So a lot of them were like, black girls and white boys, or white boys and black girls. And they were doing some kind of slavery memes. And it's
Mm.
basically the black, girls or the black boys would say something about their massa. And
Mm.
I kept thinking to myself, why is that even thought of as entertaining?
Right.
You're taking something painful in history and making it entertainment.
Mm-mm.
And it's not even entertainment in a way that is addressing the issue. It's entertainment that is
Mm-mm.
glorifying the issue as if that was a funny time in history.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's what I mean when I talk about indoctrinating certain behaviors in our culture. I'm like, I'm not accepting of that. And I think that a lot of times as parents, as members in the community, we turn a blind eye to things because, we see them, we're like, oh, that's just stupid. Well, it is what it is, but we also have to speak out against those behaviors and report those behaviors, and do whatever we can to get rid of them, because our family members, our
Yeah.
children, our people are going to be impacted by those things the more
They
that we
sure
allow those
will.
things to go unaddressed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I know, Kristen, you're
So
on
true.
TikTok, so you see some things on TikTok space sometimes, right?
Oh yes. Oh yes. Oh my goodness. It's definitely different.
But
But
social media has a heavy impact on that. I think the more
mm-hmm.
that we express ourselves in the social media space, we have to open up our thoughts to the fact that, social media is a positive and a negative. Social media is
Yes.
an expression of behaviors, but also a downfall in terms of exposing people to certain behaviors that maybe we don't really want to spread like wildfire.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
but you know where we can go with this, of course. Therapy is the new self-care. Um,
Yes.
being understanding of where people are and
Mm-hmm.
allowing for them to grow from where they are, right? Because we're not all the same. We're not all built the same.
Mm-hmm.
We all have different
Mm-hmm.
experiences. And we have to
Mm-hmm.
be open to sharing those things with others.
Mm-hmm. I love it. I love how you say open. That
Yeah.
includes open for Juneteenth as well.
Look,
um, and
yes,
uh-huh.
I
You
agree.
said something important though. Speaking of the next generation and TikTok and all of this, it is important to take a stand. And if it's something that is ignorant, and I call something like what you just described on TikTok as ignorant, we do need to say something about things like that, because our children who have no they're innocent, right? And any little thing that they see can be misleading. And if you don't take the time to sit down with your children and educate them
Yes, ma'am.
and talk to them about the importance of Juneteenth, for example, then all of that hard work that people have done and paved the way prior to us getting here would be
Right.
in vain. So it is extremely important that we do take a stand when we see things that are not correct. It's not
Right.
accurate, or it's not something that is going to push us in a positive direction.
True.
Because I just tell you right now, if my kids saw something like that, they probably would think it was funny, and it's not funny. That is not
Yeah.
funny. So it is true to speak up more and to have our freedom in that sense, where it's not just we're no longer physically chained up, but we also are mentally free. We're emotionally free. We're
True.
free intellectually. So very, very, very good point, Sandy, that you bring.
Yeah, and I definitely want us to be able to, as we acknowledge, as we celebrate, as we observe Juneteenth properly, right? Every year
Mm-hmm.
this celebration should grow, but it should not just be in the entertainment realm, right? We can carry on, we can have, family gatherings, events and parades and cookouts and all of those things. But I think it's also a day for us to take a moment to appreciate. There are people
Yes.
that had to go through quite a bit to just get the foundational basics that we have, the ability
Mm-hmm.
to just voice their thoughts, the ability to
And that's
be a
supposed to be inalienable rights, right? Our inalienable
child.
rights.
We might have to do a
Well, we have
constitutional
freedom of
discussion.
speech, all these inalienable rights that were gypped for so long.
Right.
We didn't have inalienable rights.
Like, why do we have to have all of these amendments in order to get basic foundational rights that every other citizen American has? That's
Mm-hmm.
always interesting to me. And that takes me to the conversation about professional Black men and Black women, and the voices that we have in the community. You and I both talk about our struggles when it comes to being acknowledged professionally, right? All
Mm-hmm.
other groups, when there is somebody that's a judge or a lawyer or a doctor or a nurse or a fireman or a police officer,
Police
a
officer.
you know all other groups get acknowledged for their profession. There's a respect. If they were in the military, if they get acknowledged with a level of respect. But I find a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times in the Black community that our professionals are not seen with a level of value. But the scam artists,
Mm-hmm.
right? The people who have no level of understanding of nothing, no training, no experience, no nothing, scam artists are held to a higher benefit in our community than other groups.
Mm.
And you see this in the way that a lot of fraudulent activities happen, the stories that you hear about where people are being basically conned out of thousands of dollars, or PPP loan fraud, and all of these different issues that have happened specifically within our community. I'm not going to talk about other groups because I know that exists there too, but specifically in our community, a lot of that is rooted in a lack of respect for self.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Ooh,
we
that is
we
so one point. Yeah.
we don't
Mm-hmm.
value our professionals. And I'm not saying that professionals are at a higher level than anyone else in society. I'm saying we don't value our professionals. And we
Mm-hmm.
tend to get, I know for me as an attorney, I tend to get a lot of flack from our own people. I already get it from other
Mm.
groups, right? I already get
Mm-hmm.
it from other groups, but I don't care about those other groups. I'm talking about us. I get
Mm.
it from us. And that to me is more impactful than other groups. I expect other groups to behave in certain ways, but it's
Mm-hmm.
unfortunate that I also expect us to behave in certain ways.
Mm.
So
Mm. Mm.
I
Mm.
think the translation for the next generation is that if we're going to talk about Juneteenth, if we're going to talk about Black History Month, if we're going to talk about the developments in our community, we also have to talk about the valuation that we place on members in our community. When a Black
Absolutely.
voice speaks in whatever industry or realm, I don't care if they're an entrepreneur, if they are working for the city, if they are working in a professional setting, I think that Black voice should have the same weight as any other voices. And that's one thing that I hope in having more of these discussions about freedom and what freedom actually
Mm-hmm.
means, and the observance of this, right? And, this is not just for a day off. This
Mm-hmm.
actually should be a day of, you know, observation,
Reflection and respect
reflection.
and reverence. Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. Ugh.
So I don't know, Kristen. I don't know where we're going. I think that, if we talk from slavery to present day, yes, we've made a lot of great moves and strides. But I
Mm-hmm.
can't help but feel like in many instances, we still have so far to go.
Mm-hmm.
That's just my thought.
Yeah.
But
And
I
it
think
all starts with being civil. the concept.
Ooh.
Because if you really think about that, what is being civil? What is civility?
Civility is a lot of different things, in a lot of different ways. It's having a
I
respect, like a respect for self,
mm-hmm.
and having an
A respect
understanding.
for others as
Yeah,
well. Because if you and I are having a conversation, I might disagree with you about
right.
something, but I'm still going to remain civil in my approach in dealing with you because I respect you as a person, as a human being, as a professional. And to me, that's what being civil is. And until we can really get to that level and grasp that concept, we're we're always going to have work to do.
That is
Being able
true.
to really not to see something from someone else's point of view, to be able to respect that person.
True.
Like I said, you might not agree or you might not understand, or your experience might be something a little bit different, but at the end of the day, you have to have a respect, or you should have a respect and an appreciation for who that person is.
Truth. That's the
So,
absolute truth. If you don't, you leave so much room for, it's just so much. There's so many different
chaos.
things. Yeah, there's just
Yeah.
so much. And I really wish people understood how important it is for us to have dialogue, how important it is for us to be able to share ideas and thoughts. But that reflection piece,
Mm.
I think about this a lot, and I wish that there were more outlets for us to connect on this level and really talk about how things impact our community and what we individually can do. Because I
Mm.
always go back to this: each one teach one. Each one teach one. That's the
Yes.
only way that we can actually have a greater impact. We have to be able to tap into
Mm.
somebody, and sometimes multiple
Mm-hmm.
people we can tap into. But we have to be able
Mm.
to take hold and say, all right, um, here's how I can have an impact. I talk about this summer, I have a high schooler and a law student as my interns, who are basically, sharing some time with me. I'm sharing some experiences with them. They're sharing some things with me. I'm learning from their generation, and I'm giving them some
Mm-hmm.
insight from my generation, um, and making some connections, and saying to them, hey, teach me what you know.
Mm.
I'm going to teach you what I
Mm-hmm.
know, right? I'm going to give you some
Mm-hmm.
perspective and understanding of what it's like to be in my position. But I also want you to
Mm-hmm.
teach me what I should be aware of at your level, in your generation. What are the things that I should be keeping in mind and taking to heart? Because I don't know
Mm.
everything. I really
Right.
don't.
That's true. That's true. That's a good point you bring about too, because none of us know everything. And it's that ability that you just said right there to have an openness, to want to learn, and the idea is we're forever learning, no matter how old we are.
Right.
We should be forever learning. And when you get to a point where you feel like you know it all, or you've arrived, or whatever the case may be, then that's
Right.
a sad state to be in, because yeah, that's a beautiful thing to be able to be open and to learn. Yeah.
So I think we've had a great conversation in celebration of Juneteenth. Civility Wins pays homage to Juneteenth. I think we should maybe give some final thoughts before we, close out with the, I'd say, cult classic of the Black community. I really want us to be able to take this and say, all right, there's some things that we can do. And until next Juneteenth, there are some things that we can maybe apply to our daily lives, and say, as I prepare for the next Juneteenth celebration, I look at this as 4th of July. Look at this as
Mm-hmm.
independent, whatever Independence Day that you celebrate in your country, that's what Juneteenth is. It's an
Mm-hmm.
opportunity to
Mm-hmm.
acknowledge those, um, who
Mhm.
fell to the hands of slavery, who fell to the hands of oppression, who fell to the hands of not having a voice or a freedom, and now being in a
Mhm.
position where we can actually tap into that and say, all right, we do have certain freedoms, but we still have some ways to go. So, what are your final
Mhm.
thoughts?
Yeah, I believe I'm going to challenge myself to educate the next generation to do more to do more of that. Um, because, like I said, knowledge is power, and a lot of these things, Juneteenth, for example, is something that I did not know growing up. And so I don't want that to be the experience of my children or, that next generation. So I'm going to challenge myself to educate the next generation about important events and, in honor and homage to Juneteenth. That's my commitment. How
And
about you?
I absolutely agree. I think that Juneteenth has an important role in our society, in particular, in acknowledging that there's no reason that Juneteenth should have been a federal holiday in 2021. It should have been a federal holiday a long time ago. But it goes to show in many ways that, anytime something is affiliated with the Black community, I almost feel like there's a bit of a downplay. But I think it's our responsibility in the community to be able to express these thoughts and ideas. It's our responsibility to tap into each other and share this experience
Mhm.
and share these pieces of information. We talked about Juneteenth and the color schemes being used. We talked about Juneteenth
Mm.
and what it actually meant historically. We talk about Juneteenth in terms of the commercialization, the monetization of Juneteenth. But at its core, what we all need to focus on when it comes to Juneteenth is the education. Do we understand what Juneteenth
Mhm.
is? Do we understand what Juneteenth
Mhm.
means today? And at its core, I would say we have to keep at the forefront. Juneteenth is an opportunity for us to celebrate, to pay homage to, and to
Mhm.
observe this celebration in a way that allows other groups of individuals to show as much respect to Juneteenth as we do. And my boy Jeff is joining the stream right now. Thank you, Jeff, for coming in and sharing a moment with us. We're about to close out, but if you have any final thoughts, Jeff, about Juneteenth, we definitely encourage you to post a comment in the chat, and we'll continue this discussion. But overall, we just wanted people to take a moment and reflect. So if you catch the replay of this, just put in the chat #replay, share your thoughts with us. If there's anything that stood out in our conversation, we definitely appreciate your feedback. But we also want you to know that here at Civility Wins, we love to have these conversations because when it comes to civility, we see it in every aspect of our lives. That's why we talk about it so much. That's why we decided to focus on it as a concept. But Juneteenth is about freedom. And
Mhm.
while it started with freedom of the physical, right? We're still talking about the freedom of the mental, the freedom of the spiritual, the freedom of
Mhm.
expression, the freedom of understanding that if you are in pain, you're allowed to express yourself, the freedom in understanding that mental health is actually important and it's not something to be
Mhm.
dismissed. Um,
Mhm.
so I
Mm.
think we'll leave it at that. And he said why the color red was important on this holiday. So in tapping into some of the information, I don't recall what the color red acknowledged, because I recall as I was doing some digging that the colors for Juneteenth were actually red, white, and blue. So it's still reflective of the United States, flag colors. It wasn't separating itself from that. It was just acknowledging that basically Juneteenth is American history. Juneteenth is a moment to be
Mhm.
celebrated just like any other Independence Day. And so I'm going to put in the discussion of this a link to an article or two, just so that you can kind of take a look at historically, because what we want to do with this Juneteenth celebration is also give folks a little homework, right? Take a look at some information
I love
about
that. Yep.
Juneteenth, and understand that because we're seeing a lot of imagery, some of it's going to be more commercial and some of it's going to be
Mhm.
actual factual, right? most of us, including myself, are wearing colors that has to do with, the blue, no, not blue. What is it called? Red, yellow, and green, which are African, Pan-African colors. And Jeff says the blood of slaves is what that red talks about, right? So the red signifies the blood of slaves. But many people probably would look at the colors and just think, oh, well, these are colors. But no, the colors had an implication at the time. And we definitely need to do a little bit of research and challenge ourselves so that next year when we celebrate Juneteenth, we know a little bit more. When I celebrated it last year, I knew this much. This year, I feel like I maybe have one finger. I know a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good thing, because not only can we get the kids to really tap in, we can get, the school system, we can get government institutions. I encouraged my law student intern to write a letter to her school, because she was like, my school is still having classes today. They're not observing Juneteenth. And she was like, yeah, I'm going to complain about this, because if it's a federal holiday, it should be respected just like any other. I have a friend of mine that had to go to work today. It's a federal holiday. The school system is a federal, like, why are we at school? So, I think that we still have some work to do. Kristen, your kids did they have summer school today?
There's summer camp today, and then summer school. Yes.
Now let me ask a question. If it was July 4th, would there be summer camp?
I don't believe so. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I don't know what day the 4th is. I think Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Yes, on a Monday. I'm sure they would not have anything on the Monday. So, yes, that is a great point.
Look, Jeff says, but I need to do my research. We need to do our research, right?
Yes, we need to do our research. Yep.
We need to do our research.
Absolutely.
We need to be vocal. We need to share this information as much as we can.
Absolutely.
But man, we had a good conversation, Kristen. I definitely appreciate you as always.
Yes.
So guys.
Oh, don't forget.
Go ahead.
Like, subscribe, join our YouTube channel, Civility Wins. We're also on Instagram, Civility Wins Series. And at the end of the day, let's be civil towards each other. Let's try to look at it from someone else's point of view. Let's educate ourselves. And we're paying homage to Juneteenth. Happy Juneteenth, Sandy B.
Look,
I appreciate you.
Juneteenth. Let me take us out with our cult classic, because you can't go wrong with the cult classic when it comes to really tapping into what we call Civility Wins. We have to tap in. But we thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we look forward to the next conversation. Check out our past videos, and you can find Kristen and I on Instagram at Civility Wins Series.
Yes.
Bye, guys.
Take care.
Now, as long as we don't have any watermelon at the cookout, we're good.
Oh, no, right? That's right, because I don't like watermelon. Trying to say. I don't.
Oh, man. Have a good time, guys. We'll catch you on the next one.
Take care.
All right.